morning before the hurricane, so I'm glad everyone was able to make it out. I'm a brand new Floridian. I just moved to Miami this year, so I'm very excited. Very excited for my first hurricane here. Sorry to say it. Well, I don't have a house. I live in a high rise, so it should be okay. Thank you for everyone joining me so early. Today, I'm going to be discussing Facebook Libra. It's been a hot topic, not just in the world of finance and fintech, but in the world of tech and government in general. For those that aren't familiar, Facebook is planning to launch their own digital currency or cryptocurrency next year. Before I talk about that, maybe I'll give you an intro for those who don't know me. I know some people in the audience already. I run a company called Hydrogen. The way to think about us is we're an innovation platform for fintech. So enterprises and developers use us around the globe to build all kinds of really interesting financial applications. So we provide all of the infrastructure, APIs, and libraries to do that. And I started the company about 1.5 years ago. And as the introduction was saying, I've also been in the other side of the business and started my own consumer app as well. So really, what we try to do is make it easier for companies to use these new technologies. And one of the technologies we'll talk about is blockchain and cryptocurrency. So you might ask yourself, why is Libra so controversial? I think it was about a month or two ago, they got dragged up into Capitol Hill and had all kinds of hearings within a few weeks of them announcing that they're launching this thing, which they haven't really even started working on yet. So that's really the irony of it. And it shows you, how scandal-plagued Facebook has been. If you just think about, there is a poll that I found, Harris does this poll. They look at the top 100 brands every year. And can anyone guess, out of 100, where was Facebook ranked in terms of the reputableness and the trustworthiness of Facebook? So 1 is the best, and 100 is the worst. Can anyone guess who's number 100, first of all? Facebook. Well, not Facebook.
Well, Fargo.
That's actually the US government. So that's a bit of a trick question. So Facebook is 94. So to tell you how bad that is, so like I said, the US government's number 100. Philip Morris is below them, and Sears is below them. And actually, Goldman Sachs is above them, along with Spirit Airlines. So that tells you about as much as you need to know of why they're dragged up from the Capitol Hill. Really, there's a lot of mistrust of Facebook. Why are they launching something additional? Because remember, with Facebook, you are the product. That's what they've been saying for the last 10 to 15 years. So there's a lot of skepticism out there about that. So Facebook had a valid response. What they've said is that once Libra network launches, Facebook's only going to be one member. They intend to have 100 members of this foundation they're launching. So their rebuttal is that we're essentially just 1% of the network. They said they'll have the same commitments and privileges as other members and other people with financial obligations. So it's a valid reason, I guess. And a lot of what we'll talk about this morning is, if that's really the case, why is Facebook the leader of this new organization, this new digital currency? It really doesn't make any sense. If they're one of the most controversial companies and they really are only contributing 1% to it, why in the world would they put themselves through this? And you're starting to see this now. There's been a few companies that have almost backtracked. The Financial Times came out with an article the other day that said some people are getting cold feet that, well, we didn't really think it was going to be that controversial. Well, I don't know what they expected to happen when Facebook, they're one of the most controversial companies out there. So this actually isn't the first foray for Facebook into this world. Many people don't know that they actually launched somewhat of a digital currency in 2010. This was back when I think probably some of you were purchasing tomatoes on farms on Facebook and using some of their other games that came out around that time. So they actually came out with something called Facebook credits. So these were essentially like a virtual currency that allowed you to buy different goods in their games. So if you wanted to buy more tomatoes in Farmville or whatever other games that they had, you were able to do that. And it was actually kind of weird in that $1 was equivalent to 10 Facebook credits. So a lot of people didn't really understand it. It was also offered in a bunch of different currencies, not just US dollars. And they had these gift cards that were available in stores. So you could pick this up at CVS or Walmart. And people just didn't get it at the time. Like, why do I need a digital currency? Why can't I just buy the tomatoes with my dollars? So it didn't really get a lot of traction. But they did have 150 developers and 650 games that committed to using the credits. So it really wasn't on the corporate side and the developer side that they had the issue. It was more on the consumer side. So that's something that they're trying to figure out now with their product. Because at that time, 75% of their users didn't play games. So if you think about now with digital currency, it's one of the issues that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies have. It's almost a two-sided marketplace. You need to have corporations and small businesses and e-commerce networks accept the currency if you want it to be a currency. But then you also need consumers on the other end to adopt it. So it's still one of the issues. It's a two-sided marketplace that's been going on. So really credits existed in a vacuum where you had all these developers that were offering it, but no consumers on the other end that had it. So obviously it failed within about a year of them launching it. So Facebook announced this summer that they're getting into the space again with this new project called Libra. So Libra has really three core parts. If you look at their white paper, the first is they're making their own decentralized blockchain. So this is a competitive blockchain to a Bitcoin or Ethereum, or the Chinese government now has announced a week or two ago, and we'll talk about that. They're getting into the blockchain space as well. So what they say is this is their own words, it's a secure, scalable, and reliable blockchain, and it's governed by an independent association. And number two is they have what they call low volatility cryptocurrency. So if you're familiar with stable coins or stable currencies, they'll have two of these that are held by the members and backed by different assets within the ecosystem, which they say gives it some kind of intrinsic value. And number three, they've actually created their own programming language. There's not a lot of insight into this yet. I actually just read this morning, Facebook's launching a bug bounty program for $10,000 if anyone's interested, which I don't know, Facebook giving you $10,000 seems kind of low. If you find any bugs, they'll give you $10,000 in their code, which is nice. They've opened it up. So these are really the three core components of what they've decided to launch. So within this, they'll have a foundation, and this is a Swiss foundation. I call it the $1 billion club because they intend to have 100 members of this foundation, but there's a $10 million buy-in. It's kind of like a Florida country club, but with a $10 million buy-in minimum to be a member of this foundation. But they already have close to 30 members, and you can see some of them here. There's some big companies like MasterCard and Visa and Stripe. Again, this also begs the question, why didn't just one of these companies launch this? No one would have cared, to be honest with you. Walmart put a patent out a few weeks ago for a cryptocurrency, and I don't even think it made any major publications. I only found it on Twitter. So, and Walmart is a pretty respected company, but they're not without controversy as well. So really any of these other companies could have done the same thing, and we wouldn't be in this situation that we are now. So they expect 100 members, but unlike Ethereum and Bitcoin, you have to be one of these 100 members to run a node. So if you're not familiar with how Ethereum works, I think they have 7,000, 8,000 nodes. Don't quote me on the exact number. So Hydrogen, for instance, we run a node on Ethereum. So if you think about it, 100 versus 8,000, that's 80 times more decentralized. And Ethereum could have 1 million nodes at some point. So it could be thousands of times more decentralized. And this is one of the issues that many people in the crypto community have had with this new project. In addition, the members will maintain the supply of Libra. So essentially, they could destroy any of the tokens if they wanted to. So it's not very transparent what's going on. They're also required to support that low volatility cryptocurrency through a reserve fund. So it's almost like being a part of a central bank that they've created. And they've said that this currency will be backed by Swiss francs and dollars and pounds, and also some different low volatility assets. So it's almost like a money market fund. But as we all know, in 2008, a few money market funds didn't do so well when the market went down. So even though it's a low volatility crypto, it still is going to go up and down in relation to the value of those currencies themselves. And the public, I don't think, really understands that. They just see a one-to-one benchmarking, but if the dollar loses 30% of its value, your Facebook Libra is worth 30% less. So that's another issue that they're going to have. They've also stated that eventually they intend the network to be permissionless, which means that they would expand this set and expand this 100-member network. But they said they'll let the community decide when they want to do that. So again, not very transparent when they're on Capitol Hill on that. And a lot of this wasn't very well thought out, to be honest. So just looking very quickly at the technicals. So the Facebook blockchain here is a proof of stake chain. So in plain English, basically the difference between a proof of work and a proof of stake is proof of work would be something like Bitcoin, and also the current implementation of Ethereum. Some of you might know that Ethereum is working on some other scaling solutions that wouldn't be like that, but basically in a proof of work, you're given credit for mining. So there'd be no mining in this proof of stake. The stakeholders are those 30 to 100 companies that are running the nodes. In a proof of stake based blockchain, a set of validators, they take turns proposing and voting on the next block, and the weight of each validator's vote depends on the size of its deposit or the stake. So again, Facebook's saying they only will have a 1% or so stake in the ecosystem, which hasn't been validated yet. A lot of people think that proof of stake actually has more efficiency and more security, and there's a lot of debate in the cryptocurrency community of that. What I've put up here is a few graphics from their white paper, and I put these purposely up there because they're just generic graphics that you could put in any blockchain white paper on Merkle trees, and then the one on the bottom is about validators and stakeholders. So they haven't put out a ton of technical information, and what has been good is that they've opened up the code base, like I said, over the last week, so they're having at least some third-party developers go through it, which should be nice. They've also said that, one more point, they think there'll be 1,000 transactions per second on their blockchain. That hasn't been validated again. If you take in comparison to something like Visa, they're able to do about 2 times that right now. And some of the scaling solutions that have been proposed on Bitcoin and also Ethereum have proposed about that as well, like 2 to 5,000 transactions per second. So even at 1,000, if that's their high watermark, that's really not very good, to be honest with you. And it doesn't really provide a lot of value for what we have now in the market. So something I wanted to talk about as well was their notion of being a stable coin. And this was the Argentine peso over the summer. Hopefully no one has any Argentine pesos. But it's a good time to get a stake in Buenos Aires, I guess, and go down there. So what they've done is they've tried to take the lessons learned. There's been a lot of volatility in cryptocurrency. So there have been a lot of stable coins that have been launched, especially on the Ethereum network, that have been proven very popular. We'll see how successful they are in certain market downturns. But what they've basically created is a basket of securities. Like I said, it works just almost like a money market fund. And they have different kinds of government-backed securities, currencies that they put into this basket. It's pretty similar to how some of the other stable coins work, but like I said, this is a reserve fund that's backed by those stakeholders. So you are kind of putting your life in your hands of some of those big companies. as well. So that remains to be seen if that will be successful. They've also created their own smart contracting platform, and it's called Move. So a moving van up there. There's not a lot of specifics here. They've said that they've looked at Solidity, which is what Ethereum's coding language is, and some others, and they've taken some lessons from that, and they've tried to improve on it. They have said that their coding language will be more secure. It's also saying that safety is the highest priority in what they're building. One of the issues here is that Ethereum has just a big jump start. There's tens of thousands of developers and companies like ours that are building on Ethereum. It's going to be very hard for them to convince companies to move over. But in their defense, Facebook, I believe, created React, and that's open source, and almost every company that I know now in the tech space uses that library. So there's no doubt they could create good technology. So I think out of anything, this is what probably most people in the space are most excited about, is actually their coding language. And if they're able to open source this and maybe potentially even work with Ethereum or Bitcoin, that would, to me, be the best scenario here, and actually would make everyone most happy. They've also created, again, they've created a lot of stuff. They created a kind of a separate subsidiary that's called Calibra, and they're essentially like Consensus. If you're familiar with Ethereum, they would be building different value-added things on top of the network. So for instance, they talked about creating a wallet. And this is a screenshot from Facebook that leaked out from that wallet. And this would be similar to other wallets and other projects from other companies as well. So this really begs the question, a lot of what I'm talking about is kind of a mashup of a lot of different networks. And I kind of think of it like a franking car, if you're familiar with franking cars. The one on the left is someone posted on Craigslist. They actually sold this for like $30,000, pieces from like 40 or 50 different cars. And the one in the middle is from Cuba, and the one on the right is from the Philippines, Jeepney, which are pretty fun if you've never been in one of those. That's kind of how I think of this. They've tried to take bits and pieces of different projects and piece them together, which could be successful. A lot of really good companies have been created that way. It just remains to be seen if this would be successful in this space. This hasn't really been done yet. Most people who have been starting projects have a very high conviction on one thing or the other, and they're going into one direction or the other. There hasn't been a lot of examples where firms have taken things from different places and mashed them together, which can be successful in other parts of tech, but that remains to be seen. So, if Facebook is truly just controlling 1% of this foundation and they open source a lot of the technology, I do think that this will be very positive for the space. We just didn't need all of the regulatory scrutiny. Because now what it's done is, David Marcus actually was on Twitter the other day and tweeting back and forth with people, including me. They kind of view themselves as the anti-China now, and that they're almost like the US-backed cryptocurrency. And I think we're getting into a very dangerous time where, if that's the case, where this just accelerates China and other kind of state-run cryptocurrencies, we're going to get it not in a trade war, but in a crypto war. Facebook might be one of the ones that starts it. So it's probably in their best interest if they decentralize this right now, and I think we're starting to see that. They were actually upset. There was an article that came out the other day. They're upset because a lot of the firms that were in their foundation weren't backing them. They had a lot of scrutiny on the Hill, and none of these firms said anything. Most of them were very quiet, so they're a little upset about that. So I do think they'll decentralize a bit more, and they've learned their lesson. So in the 2 minutes we have left, and I'll take some questions, I'll tell you a little bit about Molecule. So molecules are equivalent to Libra. It's similar in many ways, but the main difference is that we're built on top of Ethereum. So what we position to companies use our platform is, you don't have to wait till 2020 or 2021 for something like Libra. You don't have to put $10, $20 million in to use it. Our platform is mostly open source. All the smart contracts are open source, and we built tons of APIs. We're in what's called decentralized finance, meaning that we're built on a decentralized network, and we've created APIs and libraries on top of that. So you don't need to know anything about Move or Solidity or any smart contracting language. You could just hit APIs like you would anything else, and deploy all kinds of applications, which I'll show you here. So an example would be Remittance, which is actually a good example of what Libra should be able to do well. If you think about it, they have billions of people on Facebook and in different countries paying each other. But this actually exists right now on Ethereum. So what you would be able to do on our platform, and similar to what you could do potentially on Ripple, is you cut out the intermediaries, which are the banks in the middle that charge you those $50 wire fees and Western Union fees to do different transfers. Because everything on the blockchain costs a few pennies to do transactions. So you could basically swap, in this example, Mexican pesos for dollars. You could do that within an actual platform itself. So let's say that in this investing example, you wanted to build an investing app on our platform. All the traditional rails is already built in. If you then wanted to target someone in Mexico and say, invest in Apple on our platform, that person in Mexico now is not going to be able to do that unless they're a millionaire. But through something like blockchain and what we built with Molecule, you could actually can have them press a button and it'll swap their Mexican pesos through the Ethereum blockchain and through the protocols we built almost instantaneously for just a few cents in most cases. And that would be 24/7. So instead of waiting till Monday, today's Friday, we can't send money today because they get stuck over the weekend in the banking system. So there's just a lot of pitfalls now in trying to build these applications. Another thing would be tokenization. This is an example of tokenization you could do in our platform. So we'll let you tokenize any asset. So that could be real estate, art, portfolios, etc. And all of this hooks into your traditional applications. So another issue that Facebook's going to have is they're pitching cryptocurrency, kind of this hybrid model to MasterCard and Visa and Stripe. There really isn't a good way that they've built yet to interface that. How is MasterCard going to interface Libra with the rest of the applications they're building? So that already exists on Ethereum. We already have all that functionality now. So we're 3 to 5 years ahead of where they're going to be, because you could add these components. You could add remittance, you could add tokenization, you could add payments to traditional applications. So you can do this right now on platforms like ours that are built in a more decentralized way. So happy to answer any questions about that. I think we have about 3 to 5 minutes left if anyone has any questions. Yes, sir. So the question was some of these payment providers and payment processors. Right now, the issue is because they haven't built their own crypto networks and blockchains, a lot of these payments through crypto networks get declined through the banks and through the credit card companies. So the question was, now that they're in the Libra Foundation, are they going to work to actually make that happen? You would think so. That would be the only reason why they would join these networks. I think the biggest issue now is that to make that work, it's just really complicated. There's a lot of infrastructure and people don't realize that Ethereum and Bitcoin has been built over the last 5 to 10 years. Because remember, we have hundreds of thousands of developers that are building on these platforms. And that's the big problem that they have. They have a lot of catching up to do. If they would have launched this 3 years ago, I think it would be different. But there's just so much infrastructure. They're gonna have to put so much money. I would take over $1 billion they're gonna have to put into development. So if they're able to do that and work with these companies, I think, yes, it could be successful. And then at that point, the only issue with this is going to be the centralization people are going to have. Because there are ways now of doing the payments on Ethereum. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, is there any technical new innovations that they've brought to the market? Honestly, it's hard to say. It's just so early. They put out essentially position papers and white papers without actually building it. So they're telling you what they're going to build, and they're trying to get feedback from developers and build it as they go along. Like I said, they build some really good libraries. So I'm sure by happenstance and by accident, they're going to create some really cool things that they didn't set out to create because they have a bunch of really good coders that are just going to start building stuff. That's what we see on Ethereum as well. I think, like I said, the language that they're building, I believe, is going to be what is the killer part of their platform. But they don't even talk about it. You can't even find an article about that. And so I think people have a little bit of short-sightedness. They view it as like a cryptocurrency. We view it as digital money. It's not a cryptocurrency. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, they could make billions of dollars if they find a way to monetize this. Last question, I think. Sorry.
You talked about processing capacity. I'm blown away. 5,000 transactions a second.
1,000 for.
Okay, so and then Max, you meant we're dealing in payment processing with tens of thousands of transactions per second. How do you see that moving to payments?
It won't. It's the same issue we have. We're building on top of Ethereum. So we partner with a few companies. One will be public at DEF CON in a few months. So there's people that are building side chains and different solutions to do scaling. Essentially, you can't, blockchains weren't made to do 10,000 transactions per second. If you just look at it like that chart showed, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not vertical, it's all spread out. So you really have to use side chains and some more private blockchains to do it. But they say the max is 1,000. I was actually shocked by that when I read it in their white paper. I thought it was a mistake, because that's not good. They should have said 100,000 if they wanted to be disruptive. Because, yeah, Visa, I think they say they do 10,000, but it's really like 2,000 or 3,000. But that's still 2 times more, the max of what this network says. So that's going to be an issue. A billion users that they want to use this cryptocurrency, it's going to be very slow. And so I'm saying they're 3 to 5 years away from this being viable, unless they just put a ton of money into it. One more question, sorry, in the back. So the question was about regulation. I don't like talking about regulation. Me and the SEC don't have a good history. But the SEC said that, I read the other day, that they're excited, I think was their words, about diving in and going into Libra, which is never a good thing. You don't want the SEC to be excited about anything, except maybe cutbacks in the SEC. They're going to have some scrutiny. I think Facebook has actually started to proactively do it, and they're trying to get all the FinTech and SEC and all the other money transmission companies. And again, they're global, so one of the issues they're going to have is they need this to work, 1,000 transactions per second for 1 billion, 2 billion people in probably, 100 countries. That's going to be really complicated to do. So good luck to Facebook if we want to do that. Companies like ours, we're a little more targeted, obviously. We're smaller. We don't have 100,000 employees, so we'll pick and choose different countries. But in the end, like our clients, they have to get the regulatory approval. We don't do that. We're a technology provider. We'll tell them how to do it, but they have to get it approved. We'll just make it work. And that's the biggest difference they have, is they're kind of the technology provider and the solution at the same time, and that typically doesn't work. Like Ethereum doesn't make solutions, they have a separate company does it, which is why Facebook created the Calibra. So again, this is very opaque. We'll see how it all works out. I don't know. Cool, thanks so much. Great questions, thank you.